So in this video, we're going to go through more of the process theories. These are the theories that we use more for management research. So these are the theories that I know more about than the needs theories. Those theories are so simple and so much older and less sophisticated that they're not really used in research very much anymore. So the first process theory that we're going to talk about is equity theory. This is from Adams in 1963. So this is around the time when we've already gotten McClellan's theory of needs, and we don't yet have the ERG theory of needs. But this is a process theory because it talks about what people see as equitable in a work situation in our context, but it could be in other situations in life. Essentially, it's a little bit about I always think of kind of a balance or a scale. So we think about what we contribute at work and then what outcomes we receive. So that could be our compensation and rewards. It can also be other things like recognition, other non-tangibles like status or even having like a nice office and a good work area and colleagues to work with. In this particular theory, one reason it's a process theory is that we make comparisons between our inputs and outputs and other people's inputs and outputs. This is called a ratio of outcomes to inputs. So we look at, for example, and I'm sure some of you have had this experience before. If you find out what someone's getting paid at work, you think about whether that is fair or not, or whether that's equitable or not, based on how much you think they input for their job versus what you input for your job. And then if they get paid more than you do you think their inputs are more at their job? Maybe they're responsible for a process, a service, or a person that you're not. Maybe they had to bring in more skills, or maybe they have a professional degree that you don't. Um, those are the kinds of comparisons we're constantly making. What this results in is behaviors that we use to restore equity. So, for example, if someone's paid more than we are, but that ratio of outcomes to inputs doesn't quite fit. Like we don't see them inputting as much at their job, but they're getting more out of it. We may reduce the effort we put toward our job. We may try to go get a raise for ourselves. There are lots of things that we can do to restore equity in the relationship so that balance looks fair to us. One thing that's kind of difficult with process theories, but this theory I think especially, is that this is all of someone's perceptions. So this is why sometimes, for example, pay transparency doesn't always work to help people feel better about their own pay because the perceptions they have around how other people are paid is tied into the inputs they see those other people putting into their work and the outputs they're getting. But most of us don't see everyone else's inputs, or we don't value them the same. And so it can be very difficult when you're a manager to make sure things feel equitable for your employees without kind of divulging either too much information, because a lot of information that HR has to deal with is private for employees, or without employees having full information that they need to really make fair comparisons. So the key insight here is that perceived fairness drives motivation and satisfaction, especially for employees at work. But you can already tell, there are some criticisms to this theory. For example, in this theory, theoretically, if someone else is overpaid, or if you feel you're overpaid, this is a better example. If you feel that you're overpaid compared to someone else when you do this comparison, maybe you actually put fewer inputs to your job, but you get paid more than they do. Most of us don't try to rectify that situation. We're pretty happy with the fact that we're getting paid what we are, and we feel bad for the other person. But we don't go to our supervisors usually and ask for less pay. We don't usually negotiate or push for more pay for that other person to make that situation more equitable. And so that's like a huge criticism about the theory. It just doesn't work when we talk about overpayment of ourselves. It also puts too much emphasis on those outcomes and it underestimates inputs. And again, I said one reason that people underestimate inputs is they don't see everyone else's inputs, because a lot of inputs are intangible. It's the skills you brought, it's the education you have, the experience and background you bring. A lot of us don't know that about all of our colleagues that we work with. And sometimes when we think about outcomes, for a lot of people, it's just focusing on that salary or the dollar amount. It's not thinking about the benefits that they're bringing, but also other things that people are getting at their jobs, like titles, status, that sort of thing that maybe people value. Very related to equity theory is what we call organizational justice. We don't usually call it organizational justice theory. I don't know why. This comes from Greenberg, but this comes like 20 some years later. So in 1987. So this is the latest so far of all the theories we've talked about. This one is very much in the literature. Both of these are. But in this theory, there are different kinds of justice, and our book talks about three kinds of justice. We have distributive justice, which is fairness of outcomes. When we're talking about compensation, it really means your salary amounts or hourly wages. We have procedural justice, so the fairness of processes. So again, in compensation, this would usually be the process of how people's salaries or hourly wages are determined. And then interactional justice, this is how people are treated. Usually in a workplace, interactional justice is mostly about supervisors. It can be about people's colleagues or other people they work with, but usually we expect, for example, our supervisors to give us a heads up if something's about to happen. Like say higher level leadership is going to start giving people bonuses. We expect our supervisor to let us know that, so it's not like a surprise, or to sort inform us about how that process is being made so that we feel like we at least got, we have someone we can talk to and feel heard from. The key insight with organizational justice is that all three forms of justice impact our job satisfaction and engagement. You can't focus on just one or two of these. All three of these need to feel like they're happening in the workplace for people to feel like they're working in a fair workplace and that they're being valued for the contributions they're making at work. One criticism, and this is very similar to the criticism of the equity theory from Adams, is that reality versus the perception of fairness may be quite different. So, distributive justice, it's very possible that people don't always know the compensation and benefits that their coworkers are getting. So that just means that people may have an inflated sense, for example, of what they think they should earn based on what they see people in other companies earning. But it may be in your organization, people don't earn as much, or there are other kinds of benefits that are given that people aren't always considering. When we think about procedural justice, people may not understand why a process exists or why it exists the way it does. This happens to me all the time at work. I work in a university, which is a huge bureaucracy. We have lots of procedures for lots of things, and I actually don't know why we have a lot of the procedures that we do. Some of it may be just historical mishap that something happened, someone made a decision once, and that's the way we do things, but there's not really a logical reason behind it. But usually it's because there's some kind of system or there's some checks and balances that I'm not aware of that have to be incorporated into a process, which makes it lengthy, but it also means it's more fair or at least more transparent to the public. And then with interactional justice, sometimes, and some of you, if you've ever been in management, may have been in this situation. Supervisors can't always divulge all of the details of everything they know in a situation to their employees. This can feel unfair to employees, but it could be to protect someone's privacy, especially if it's an HR matter. It could be that there's information that will be forthcoming in the future, but it's not decided yet. A really classic example, I keep using layoffs as the example, but this seems like an easy one. If you're going to lay off people, you're going to announce it all at once to everyone. You're not going to let supervisors announce it individually to their employees because everyone who will be laid off needs to deal with it simultaneously. And so that can feel like injustice, interaction, like an interactional injustice, but it's really not. One that you probably are very familiar with, but maybe didn't know there was a name for it, is goal setting theory. This comes from Locke and Latham. This is in 1968. So again, this is in the same time that we have the needs theories dominating a lot of the psychological space on motivation. So here, essentially what happens is if people make goals, that directs their attention and effort into fulfilling those goals. And so at work, if we have employees creating challenging goals, they're able to put their effort and attention at work on those specific goals instead of just doing everything kind of either haphazardly or trying to fulfill all of the parts of their job description equally. Some of those things may not be as important as others, and goals can help you direct your attention to things that are important. Um, Challenging goals seem to be the most effective according to research. What challenging goals are goals that are a little beyond someone's skill level at this current moment when they're making the goal, but it's something they can definitely attain in the sense of getting additional training or more practice to be able to reach that goal. So it's reachable, but it's not necessarily something they could do today because they don't know how to do it yet. Commitment increases with participation in goal setting. So, the best way to do goals, according to this theory, is to let employees be part of the process of actually developing their own goals or even helping to develop the goals of the organization at some level. And if people get to develop their own goals, which is very common in most workplaces, they're more likely to be very motivated to meet those goals. Feedback enhances goal effectiveness because it tells people what they're doing well, but it also helps them to correct things that they could be doing more productively or that could be more efficient for them. And so that means that supervisors need to be giving, or other people that, like colleagues that someone is working with, need to be able to give someone feedback, especially if it might help them be more efficient or effective in whatever they're doing. So a key insight, you've probably heard of SMART goals. I put a little graphic here of SMART goals here work best. SMART goals are specific, so you say exactly what you want someone to do. They're measurable, you know when they've actually done it. It's achievable in the sense that it might be something they can't do today, but they can learn how to do it so they can do it in the near future or whatever time frame you're giving them. They're very realistic. They're not something that's completely out of the realm of possibility for this person, or at least not in a manner, not in a time frame that would be doable, like 6 months or a year. And they're timely. You set a time limit as to how long that person has to meet that goal. One criticism is that an over-reliance on goals can lead to unethical behavior. I've used this example before in class, but it's probably one that you've heard in the news. A few years back, Wells Fargo was fined by the SEC because they had a goal of opening so many accounts per quarter. And what some of their bankers were doing was opening accounts in current customers' names, like new accounts, to get more accounts toward the count that that bank needed or that specific individual needed to make for that quarter. But they didn't always tell the customers they were opening a new account in their name, which is illegal. And so customers would find out if, say, there was no money in this account, and then they started getting like fees put against them because they had no money in the account, or something else, and they're like, I didn't open this account. Why am I now responsible for paying these fees or whatever? So an over reliance on goals can direct too much attention and effort, and not without people thinking about what are the ethical considerations that they need to be thinking about as they're making decisions at work. Also, goals can sometimes decrease intrinsic motivation because you become so focused on the goal that the things that you really enjoyed about your job that made it interesting or challenging, or that you were curious about, you can lose interest in those in just trying to actually meet a goal at work. So it can almost become that you are becoming myopic at work on just focusing on goals instead of why you really do the job that you do. Expectancy theory is another one that we use. I like this theory because for me, it seems very straightforward. This was developed by Vroom in 1964. So again, when needs theories were still big. And there are three kinds of beliefs that we have, or you can think about this as an employee. You've probably had these beliefs yourself. The first one is an expectancy belief, and you can see I put a graphic of expectancy theory on the bottom here that I was able to find that was copyright free online. Expectancy would be this first box. It's called effort. It's a belief that your effort leads to performance. So an employee's expectancy belief is around the question, can I hit my targets if I work hard? So I have some kind of expectations for my organization. Can I actually meet that with what I know how to do or what I can do, the skills that I have? The second belief is instrumentality. That's the second circle here. This is called performance. And it's a belief that your performance leads to rewards. So, do you think that hitting your targets will lead to the rewards at work? Part of this, or a big part of this, I think, is about whether someone will recognize that you actually hit those targets. So, that's where SMART goals come into play. If you have something that's measurable, that's when your performance could actually be recognized by someone else, and that could lead to those rewards. And then the third belief is what we call valence. And this is the value you place on rewards. And it's the reward, the green circle here on the bottom. And so, do you find the rewards that you would get if you actually put your effort toward a really good performance desirable? So, maybe you get a bonus. Maybe you want more money. So, that would be desirable. But maybe a lot of us work in places where we don't necessarily get compensation. For as a reward, in which case maybe just a recognition of a good job is all we're going to get. For some people, that might be enough, and for others, that may not be very motivating. So the key insight here is that there is a formula for motivation with this theory. You have to have expectancy times instrumentality times valence. If any one of these three pieces is missing, you're not going to have an employee that's motivated to do their work. So they have to know that their effort will lead to a performance that will be recognized for the rewards they want. One criticism is that this assumes people make decisions based purely on self-interest, that people are making this kind of decision. Will my effort lead to the performance I need to get the reward I want for everything they do at work? But most of us probably don't work that transactionally. A lot of us do things at work because We have altruistic purposes. For example, training a new employee when that's not part of our job. We might just do that because we're good people and we want to help other people. There could also be other kinds of things that you desire at work that have nothing to do with your own self-interest. Maybe you just want to make the workplace better for your colleagues because you enjoy working with them. Well, this expectancy theory wouldn't help you then figure out how to motivate employees who have that kind of interest. It also focuses mostly on tangible rewards, so it's not thinking about intangible things like recognition, status, helping others, that sort of thing that for a lot of people is much more important sometimes than those tangible rewards like compensation and benefits, especially when you're at a level of compensation or you have benefits that help meet your basic needs.